Chapter 7. The Jarretts of Virginia. Along the banks of the Wolf Creek, where it joins the Greenbrier River, was a very dangerous place to be in 1771, and certainly not a place for the faint-hearted. It was located in Greenbrier County, Virginia, now Monroe County, West Virginia. The Jarrett brothers, James, David, Jesse, and Owen, were clearing an area, and cutting logs to build a fort for protection from Indian attacks. On a Thursday night, December 16, 1773, the Boston Tea Party took place in the harbor of Boston. This act would eventually lead to the Revolution against Mother England, and the founding of the United States of America. Some say that the Jarrett brothers were French Protestant Huguenots, pronounced Huguenots. The Catholic Church did not tolerate other churches, and they were fleeing Marseille, France, and the reign of terror of Louis XV. They were also purported to have first migrated to Scotland and northern England, and from there to Pennsylvania, and finally Virginia. The fort became known as Jarrett's Fort. During an Indian attack in 1774, it was commanded by Daniel Boone. David Jarrett lived on Wolf Creek until 1791, when he moved to Kanawha County. His 625-acre land grant was on the Elk River, near the salt works. He was a member of the Baptist Church. He died in 1808, and is buried on his family farm. T.H. Jarrett married Sarah Campbell, January 4, 1779. This is the only information on Jesse. Owen married Mary Duran, April 17, 1780. A son, John, was born in Greenbrier County. He married Mary, unknown. John died October 21, 1859, at the age of 72 years, 4 Mo, 22 Dis. He resided at Cabin Creek, Virginia. James Jarrett I, this writer's great-great-grandfather, was born about 1740 or 1750. He left Wolf Creek in about 1787, and moved a few miles north to the banks of Muddy Creek, some 4 miles north of Alderson, and a mile from Blue Sulphur Road. In about 1799, he constructed a cabin on a hillside overlooking the creek. This would become his permanent dwelling place, although its appearance and proportions have long since been obliterated. After the log portion was built, a stone wing was added, and later this was covered with plaster. Next, a large fireplace and chimney were built. Finally, high above the ground, a front porch was added along the entire length of the house. At this point in time, and as far as I know, it is still standing, after 203 years. James was married twice, first to Elizabeth Griffey, in about 1770. She was a devout Presbyterian, who, in spite of hostile Indians lurking about, was such a conscientious person that she would rise very early on Sunday mornings and walk the 12 miles over Muddy Creek Mountain, to church in Lewisburg. She would not ride a horse because she felt the tired horses needed their day of rest. Her own day of rest was without a doubt an unknown luxury. Elizabeth bore 12 children, it is believed that 2 died at birth. There was William, who married Kitty Madison, on Thursday, April 9, 1807. James Jr. married Ruth Gwynn. Then there was David and Abraham. Owen, who married Elizabeth Vincent, and Leah, who married James Graham. Nancy married Benjamin Morris, Margaret married Levi Morris, Elizabeth married William Jones, Isaac married Margaret Macy. The mother of these 10 children, Elizabeth Griffey Jarrett, died in 1802. On December 10, 1803, James Jarrett I, married Rosanna Vincent. Rosanna was born, February 1, 1779. At the time of her marriage she was approaching her 24th birthday, and James was approximately 55 years old. Rosanna bore him 8 more children. Delilah was born September 20, 1804. She married Jacob Hamilton on January 6, 1825. The records list only one child born to them, Virginia W. Hamilton. She married George W. Buster, son of Major Claudius Buster and Ann Chilton. Jacob Jarrett was born about 1805. He married Mary Hammock, the daughter of Martin and Susanna Hammock. Records show she died August 30, 1855, at the age of 45. The records available indicate 4 children were born to them. Virginia Jarrett about 1827, Elizabeth, about 1834, Harrison, about 1840, and Abraham, about 1842. There could have been more children born to both Delia Hamilton and her brother, Jacob Jarrett, and his wife Mary, but these were the only records found. George Washington Jarrett was born June 30, 1807. He married Emily Grant in about 1830. James Madison Jarrett was born about 1810. He married Ruth Hamilton May 16, 1827. In Greenbrier County, Virginia. Evelyn Jarrett was born February 14, 1813. She married Jacob Smith January 26, 1837. She died October 2, 1840. Vincent Jarrett was born February 18, 1815. He married Rebecca Carraway August 10, 1844 in Greenbrier County. Rebecca was born September 14, 1824. Vincent acquired his father's home place, and his family of 4 boys and 9 girls were all born in the old house. The only child that a record was found on was James William Jarrett, who married Jenny Susan Kenny. The last child born to James Jarrett Sr. and Rosanna Jarrett was Levi Morris Jarrett, my great-grandfather. He was born on Wednesday, July 23, 1817. His father died 5 years later, in 1822. At the time of his death, Levi was 5, Vincent 7, Eveline 9, James Madison 12, George W. 15, Jacob 17, and Delilah 18. The records show that during his life, he fathered 18 children. However, it has been stated, but not documented, that the actual number was 25, if those that died at birth were included. The following year after James's death, Rosanna married Mihail Duffy on October 1, 1823. At the time of this marriage she was 44. She passed away July 21, 1864, just 21 days after the birth of my grandfather, John Luther Jarrett. His birthday was June 30, 1864. At the time of James Jarrett Sr.'s death, he owned well in excess of 2,300 acres, 22 horses, 53 head of cattle, plus 1 lot of young cattle, 2 sheep, 40 hogs, and 16 slaves, 8 male, 4 female, 1 child and 3 whose gender was not specified. They were sold to Thomas Bennett for $621. James Jarrett's will, copied as written, in the name of God, Amen. I, James Jarrett of the County of Greenbrier and Commonwealth of Virginia, being weak in body but of sound and perfect mind and memory, and considering the uncertainty of this mortal life, and do being of sound mind and memory, and blessed be Almighty God for the same, do make and publish this my last will and testament in manner and form following, that is to say, first I give and bequeath unto beloved wife Rosanna Jarrett this my house, together with all my plantation and land on this side of Muddy Creek, to have, hold, use, occupy, possess, and enjoy all and singular the profits and advantages, dur !_ng her natural life, also all the cleared land on the other side of said creek as far as the top of the neck land ridge during her widowhood, so as not to interfere with the land of Jacob Jarrett and Morris. I also give and bequeath to my beloved wife 1/3 of all my household and kitchen furniture during her natural life, also 1 Negro woman named Rachel, 1 wagon, and 5 horses, 6 milk, cows, 10 sheep, 20 hogs her choice during her natural life, also 1 Negro man named Gabriel and 1 Negro man named Tom, which she is to hold during her widowhood, and as the above is released from her by marriage or by the expiration of her natural life, it returns to my H2 years as hereafter, provided then I give and bequeath to my beloved daughter Delilah Jarrett 1 Negro girl named Vina, and 1 Negro boy named Caperton, 1 roan mare, and 1/3 of all my household and kitchen furniture, all of which to remain with her mother until she shall arrive at full age or marries. Then I give and bequeath also 1 carriage and harness. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved daughter Avelina Jarrett 1 Negro girl named Mary and 1 Negro boy named Misery, 1 mare her choice, also 1/3 part of all my household and kitchen furniture, which is to remain with her mother until she shall arrive at age or marries. Then I give and bequeath to my 2 sons Jacob Jarrett and Morris Jarrett jointly 100 acres of land lying attached to the house built by Burton, also 100 acres on the opposite side of Muddy Creek, beginning on a corner white oak on the bank of the creek with Henry Metzger's line and running up the ridge for quantity, also 1 Negro boy called Jonathan, to be equity between them, the land to be divided agreeable to quality and quantity, provided nevertheless that if either of them should be without issue, then the surviving one to possess the whole. Then I give to my 2 sons George Washington Jarrett and James Madison Jarrett the residue of the Mathis tract, including that part left to my wife during her widowhood. If neither of them should die without issue, the other gets all. Then I give to my 2 sons Vincent Jarrett and Levi Jarrett at the expiration of my wives, natural life the home tract of land to be divided agreeable to quality and quantity equally between them. It is also my will that if the above-named Negro woman Rachel should breed and have children that they be equally divided between my two sons Vincent and Levi Jarrett at the expiration of my wife's widowhood. If either of them dies without issue, then the other enjoys all. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son William Jarrett and his heirs forever a tract of land whereon he now lives, also $200 in cash to be paid by my executors as soon as convenient after my decease. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son James Jarrett and his heirs forever 400 acres of land situated, lying and being in Greenbrier County on Mill Creek Mountain opposite to land surveyed for Jacob Skiles, also one Negro boy named Charlie. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son David Jarrett the tract of land whereon he now lives. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son Abraham Jarrett my part of a tract of land surveyed, in partnership by Colonel Dickinson and myself, lying on Elk Creek, Kanawha County. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son Owen Jarrett 700 acres of land whereon he now lives. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved daughter Leah Graham one Negro boy named Plem and $300 to be paid by my executors so soon as convenient after my decease. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son-in-law, and daughter Benjamin Morris and Nancy his wife the following property, viz., one Negro man named Jerry, one Negro woman named Mary and their youngest child, and $500 and $500 to cash to be raised out of the profits of my salt works or otherwise. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved Levi Morris and Margaret his wife $800 in cash to be paid as above described. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son-in-law, and daughter William Jones and Elizabeth his wife $800 in cash to be paid by my executors as soon as it can be made by the sale of my personal property or otherwise. Then I give and bequeath to my beloved son Isaac Jarrett $800 in cash to be paid as soon as can be made by my executors. It is also my will that my executors lay out $10,000 of the salt works money in Congress land in the interim country to be equally divided between all my heirs. It is also my will that my wife have the use of all my farming utensils, jars and so forth. It is also my will that the smith tools remain for the use of the children that is convenient. It is also my will that if my wife should marry that my executors shall take care of the furniture left to my two daughters if it appears likely to go to waste. Lastly, for the residue of my estate goods and chattel, I leave them to be sold and disposed of by my executors. I also constitute, and appoint my beloved wife Rosanna Jarrett and John Henchman executors to this my last will and testament, and my wife Rosanna Jarrett and Benjamin Morris guardians to my children which I have had by my wife Rosanna Jarrett and Benjamin Morris Jarrett. And I therefore leave this my last will and testament, revoking all former wills by me, be made in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and affixed my seal this 19th day of January 1008 signed, sealed, published and declared by the said James Jarrett to be his last will and testament. In the presence have witnesses to the same James Jarrett: Andrew Hamilton, John Fraser, mark seal, William Johnson. Greenbrier County Court, July term 1822. This instrument of writing purport to be the last will and testament of James Jarrett deceased was presented in court and proved by the oaths of Andrew Hamilton and John Fraser, two of the subscribing witnesses, there to have been duly executed and acknowledged by the said James Jarrett deceased as and for his last will and testament, which is ordered to be recorded, and thereupon Benjamin Morris, James Jarrett and John Hencham entered into bond with Joseph Alderson, Jacob Hockman, Robert Renix, William Graham and Joel Slodgel their securities, and the penalty of $60,000 conditioned as the law directs, and took the oath prescribed by law. Therefore probate and letters testamentary is granted the said Benjamin Morris, James Jarrett and John Henchman in due form of law as the acting executors of the said James Jarrett deceased. Test. Lewis Stewart, C.G. C. How strange and unbelievable, Grandpa's last will sounds in today's America. The idea that other human beings were considered another's property, to be bought and sold, and even passed on to one's descendants, seems preposterous. However, we must bear in mind that the practice of slavery was both socially and morally acceptable throughout a large portion of the country in those days. It is a little known fact that slavery was also practiced on the African continent between warring tribes, and sometimes their captives were traded to the American and Spanish slave ships. In defense of the white man, he was not the first to introduce slavery in America. There are numerous accounts of slavery being practiced between the warring Indian tribes, before and after the arrival of the white man. In 1846, an Indian chief that operated a trading post and farm at the village of Westport, Missouri, owned a considerable number of slaves. There were also Indians who bartered their daughters to white men for horses and other possessions. It is easy to condemn the practices that were carried on during that period of time, and justifiable so, but can anyone say for certain if they had been living back then, and had been given total power over other human beings? Would they have acted any differently? If the roles had been reversed, and the oppressed had been the oppressors, would things have been any different? History has proved that no race or group of people have a franchise on cruelty and greed, as well as goodness and mercy. Both kinds have been around since the beginning of time, and I see no indication that it will ever be otherwise. This will bear out the truth of this statement. As I write these words in the present year of 2002, a civil war has been raging on the African continent in the Sudan. It has been going on for several years, with thousands of helpless unarmed men, women, and children, being slaughtered, at the hands of their fellow countrymen. During this one-sided war, innocent people were kidnapped from their villages, and are now being held hostage for ransom. In Grandpa's defense, there is reason to believe that he and his family were kind to the people in his charge. At the beginning of the Civil War, James Jr. owned over 40 slaves, many of which remained loyal to the family and were given land and cared for, several years after the war, until they became adjusted to the new freedom and were able to go it alone. James Jarrett Sr., without a doubt, was our wealthiest ancestor. However, it came as no surprise that none trickled down to me. At this stage of my life, the only trickle down that I ever expect to get, will be the water dripping into my coffin after a heavy spring rain. Out of all of James Sr.'s children, James Jr. was the only one that remained in Greenbrier County. He married Ruth Gwynn. He added even more land to the vast acreage his father had amassed, and became even more prosperous. James Jarrett, too, half-brother to my great-grandfather Levi, had 15 children. His first son Joseph, was born, in 1811, in Greenbrier County, Virginia. Monroe County, WV, he married Melinda McClung, daughter of Ned McClung, and Sally Vinay McClung. Sally's father was John Vinay, who settled in the county in 1775. His old original cabin is still standing in the shadow of Muddy Creek Mountain. James Jr. and Ned McClung's plantations joined one another. This made a very sizable merger of property. 1,500 acres of their land lay between Muddy Creek and Mill Creek. The small two-story cabin of Joseph and Millen Jarrett still stands today above Blue Sulphur Road, a few miles north of Alderson, West Virginia. The second son of James II was Andrew, born August 28, 1813. He married Susan J. Graham, daughter of Samuel Graham and Sally Jarrett. Susan was born July 20, 1818. Andrew and Susan's grandfathers were brothers, James Sr. and David Sr. This made Andrew and Susan second cousins. Andrew and Susan are the first of our Jarrett clan, known to have migrated to Missouri. They came in 1837, and settled in Daviess County, where they raised 5 children. They were married Jane Jarrett, Ruth Angeline, who married James A. Meadows, James Madison Jarrett, Sidney Eunice Jarrett, born about 1840 in Salem Township, Daviess County, and Samuel A. Jarrett, who married Angelina Black. Andrew Jarrett was my great-grandfather Levi Jarrett's nephew, although Levi was 4 years younger than his nephew. Levi married Paulina Gwynn, December 16, 1847. They had 9 children. It is not known what relation Paulina was to Ruth Gwynn, wife of James II. Levi and Paulina's first 2 sons listed were James and Joseph. Little information is known about these two. When I was born, and my grandma Jarrett was told what I had been named, she was not at all happy about it. She said that my grandpa Jarrett had a brother named Jim, and that he was the meanest man she ever knew. My dad mentioned many years ago that Grandpa's brothers went to Oklahoma or Texas. I sure would like to research them someday. Who knows what stories we might find. Always bear in mind when you start searching your family tree, you may find 1 or 2 hanging in it. You can choose your friends, but with relatives, what you find is what you get. You may find bank robbers, congressmen, or royalty, but in genealogy you can't throw the little uns back and keep the big uns. However, you can brag about the big uns, and hide the little uns. My grandpa John Luther Jarrett's brothers and sisters were born on the following dates, in Greenbrier County, Virginia. Now, Monroe County, West Virginia. Mary Jarrett was born January 10, 1858, Emily Ellen Jarrett, April 22, 1854, Charlie Washington Jarrett, December 20, 1859, Alice Jarrett, August 4, 1850, and Edna Virginia Jarrett, May 24, 1862. After the death of Levi's mother, he loaded his family into a covered wagon and headed west. Sometime between 1864 and 1866 they arrived in Indiana, where Walter Davis Jarrett was born, December 6, 1866. Sometime between 1866 and 1870 they arrived in Daviess County, Missouri. The oldest record of the family's arrival was the 1870 census. Levi was 53, Paulina 43, Alice 19, James 18, Emily 16, Joseph 14, Mary 12, Charles 10, Virginia 8, John 6. Levi, no doubt, had decided to come to Missouri because of Andrew's family being here. If only I had questioned my grandpa, John Luther Jarrett, about their trip, and those early pioneers of his day. He did tell my dad that they made the trip in a covered wagon. Andrew lived only 5 years after coming to Missouri. He died March 19, 1842, and was buried in the Bethel Cemetery, near to where the town of the New Pattonsburg is now located. At this writing, Pattonsburg has been relocated 3 miles north of the Grand River floodplain, on Virginia Ridge. When they arrived in Missouri, they named the ridge in memory of their former home state. The Great Flood of 1993 was the last of many that precipitated the move. The first property that Levi purchased in Daviess County was a lot in Jameson. The year was 1870. He bought it from Mary A. Anderson for $100. In 1875 he purchased 83 acres from Benjamin and Margaret Billingsley for $750. In 1880 they purchased another lot in Jameson for $100 from J. M. Murphy. John Marcus Armstrong was believed to have been born in Illinois, date unknown. Data on the Armstrongs is unknown. Laura Catherine Coffey Armstrong was born October 15, 1839, at Fairplay, Indiana. I can remember seeing her at Grandma's house when I was 5 years old. She lived with them for a while, prior to her death. She was a small woman, and we called her Little Grandma. She passed away, December 28, 1935, at Kansas City, Kansas. She is buried at Mount Album Cemetery, near her daughter Laura Bell. I don't know where her husband is buried, and find it odd that he is not with her, but I believe he was a younger man when he died. Her parents were John Wade Coffey and Laura Esther Krantz. He was born March 9, 1814, at Fairplay, Indiana, and she was born in New York State, November 4, 1814. They were wed in 1836, and she passed away in August 1889, and he on December 9, 1897. Both at Pattonsburg. Children of John Marquis Armstrong and Laura Catherine Coffey were Laura Bell, Dora, Minnie, Ida, Grace, Maud, and John Marquis. They were all born at Coffey, Missouri, and information is very minimal on her sisters and brother, but I can remember them well, back in the old days at family reunions. Dora married a Meadows. She died January 28, 1956, at St. Joseph, Mo. Minnie married a Morris. She died in St. Joseph, Missouri. Ida, if she was married, it is unknown. She died in Denver, Colorado. Grace married a Hayes, and she died November 30, 1959, at Kansas City, Missouri. Maud was born April 24, 1875. She married a Reed. The date of her death is unknown. John Marquis was married, and he died in Kansas City, Missouri. John Luther Jarrett and Laura Bell Armstrong were wed Wednesday, April 27, 1892, at Coffey, Missouri. Grandpa Jarrett was a carpenter, brick mason, and concrete man. Their firstborn child was Laura Lucille, May 3, 1893. The second child was a son, John Lloyd, January 6, 1895. The third child born was my father, Lester Armstrong Jarrett. He was born on Election Day, Tuesday, November 3, 1896. Grover Cleveland was the president. He was the only president that has ever served 2 non-consecutive terms. The Democrat was both the 22nd and 24th president. Maurice Leon closed out the 19th century. He was born December 2, 1899. Ida Laverne opened the 20th century, on February 4, 1901, followed by Marcus Luther, March 7, 1903. These children were all born in Pattonsburg, Missouri. Grandma took a much-deserved rest for the next 5 years, then on September 28, 1908, she gave birth to the seventh, and last child that they would have, Ernest Reed, at Gilman City, Missouri. In the census of 1900, Grandpa was listed as a bridge carpenter, and Grandma was keeping house. Lucille was in school, and Lloyd, Lester, and Loris were at home. Dad once showed me the house that he was born in. However, too many years have passed since then, and I cannot say for certain which one it was. It was east of the downtown area, and on the northernmost edge of the town. I could find no record of Grandpa owning property in Davie East County, and therefore must assume that they rented all the years that they were there. The record states that Ernest was born in Gilman City. This would indicate that they may have lived there sometime between 1903 and 1908, where my grandmother Loria's parents may have been living there and she went there to have her baby so that her mother could be with her. We will know, the ones that could have shed some light on this, have long since passed away. Pattonsburg lay in the floodplain of the Grand River, and during the night of July 4, 1809, one of the worst of the many floods that had plagued Pattonsburg, surged through the town destroying property and sweeping one man to his death. Destroying property and sweeping one man to his death. Destroying property and sweeping one man to his death. Destroying property and sweeping